Comeback of the year.
And so for comeback of the year, you saw it up on the screen, and we talked about a couple of these fighters beforehand. We're talking Mackenzie Dern. I mean, again, coming off of the pregnancy, she had the one win. You think back to the loss against Amanda Hebos. It is what it is. Her 2020 was absolutely amazing. She definitely deserved to be in female fighter of the year category, but for comeback of the year, just continues to put on very good performances, moving up the ladder at 115 pounds. You're looking at Brian Ortega, a guy that came off of knee surgery. He'd been away for a very long time. And factor in especially the fight at UFC 231 against Max Holloway. He got beaten so badly. So for him to come back, the improvements in the striking, absolutely amazing. Cody Garbrandt, the knockout losses, comes back against the Sun Tzu, throwing hands like, I don't know what, like a vintage John Lineker, and absolutely puts out a Sun Tzu. Great stuff from him. Conor McGregor, away from the sport for so long. And I don't care if it's Donald Cerrone. I think he's deserving to be in here. And John Franklin with KSW. Mamed Khalidov definitely deserves to be here. Reason why, he had 3 straight losses. Narkun, Ashcombe. He had some personal legal issues in the past. He comes back, and we're probably going to talk about it later on. Runs across the cage, jump switch kick against Askham, knocks him flat against the cage, and then wins the fight. It was absolutely amazing. Mamed Khalidov, at a later age, there was a long time where this guy was the greatest middleweight to never be in the UFC. Yeah, who didn't want to see him fight Anderson Silva at the height of his prime? Mamed Khalidov definitely deserving to be in this list. John Franklin, is there a clear-cut winner here, or does somebody rack up as maybe like a close second?
You know, I think it's interesting because, listen, I got nothing against Khalidov. No, let's not go down that road. So I think that, Cody Garbrandt to me reminds me a little bit of the Pittsburgh Steelers, right? They got it. They came out undefeated. We thought it was right to the Super Bowl. Cody Garbrandt came out undefeated, and it was like, man, did we just figure this guy out? Like, what happened? He beats Dominic Cruz, and then it's like, okay, Dillashaw, I get maybe Dillashaw's got his number, and then we find out he pops. But then Munoz knocks him out in the first round. It's like, is this kid even who he thought he was? And then he comes back against the Sun Tzu. So in terms of a career resurgence, listen, the losses to Dillashaw are enough to put you out of the sport. Like we talked about earlier with Esparza, we talked about Bisping. But then getting knocked out in the first round, it's like you got to start looking in the mirror and figuring out who you are. So for that kid to come back and do what he did was impressive. Listen, set himself up for a title shot in a different weight class. As far as, Dern with the pregnancy, I'm not going to sit here and speak about having knowledge of pregnancies or all that. I mean, after kids, like bouncing back from that and getting back to fighting shape, much less, postpartum and all that sort of stuff, cannot be underappreciated at all. Brian Ortega, though, and you touched on it, it's not just the injury. It's the injury coming off of the fight. I mean, you're fighting a guy that's showing you how to defend him, right? And now you're turned into a meme. Like there could not have been a worse performance than the one he put on against Max Holloway. So then on the heels of that, next thing you know, when I'm getting ready to come back and restart my engine, I'm injured. Now I got to deal with that. Yeah, it's a pretty stacked category. You can make cases for everybody up and down.
Now, Matt, got to tip our hand here. With Brian Ortega, he's originally supposed to compete 1 year after UFC 231. He's supposed to take on the Korean Zombie, and then it fell. So Frankie steps in and gets finished. And the lore of the Korean Zombie is back and in full force. Brian Ortega, oddly enough, didn't have his main cornerman, his main coach in the corner for the fight against the Korean Zombie and Henry Gracie. He wasn't able to make it. Brian Ortega looked like a totally different fighter. I mean, yes, there were some people in the comments section that said Brian Ortega is going to blow the doors off the Korean Zombie and striking is going to be totally improved. I don't think anybody knew that Brian Ortega was going to look like that in that cage. Matt, I got to do this. The award's got to go to Brian Ortega, but can you elaborate on this one?
Yeah, and this can be really short, really sweet. I thought Brian Ortega was going to die. Not like really die, but I didn't think this fight was going to be competitive in the least bit because it had all the building blocks for a failure on Brian Ortega's behalf. Because when you look, okay, Brian Ortega, he's great on the ground, but so's the Korean Zombie. He has good stand-up, but it's not like he can outbox the Korean Zombie. And Zombie's been going out and basically just blowing the doors off everyone. He's got great power in his hands, and he's really technical on the feet. And for Brian Ortega to just go out there and box his ears in pretty much, like, it was an absolute masterclass of a performance. You kept on saying he looked different, probably because he cut off about 6 feet worth of hair. He did look very different by the time he got to the cage, but with the bad weight cut, with all the storylines leading up to that fight, I don't know how you can't give it to Brian Ortega. Like John had said, he was getting shown how to defend punches in his previous fight. Like, he didn't just lose to Max Holloway, he got embarrassed in that fight. And for him to come back and look like this completely new and reinvented fighter, I believe that Brian Ortega can get a title one day, and that's not something I ever thought I would have said after the Max Holloway fight.
All right, so we continue rolling along into yet another one of the most interesting categories that we have here, the Rookie of the Year.